The screams echoed through the crystalline chambers of the Zephyrian mothership as two small figures were dragged toward the ritual pit. Ambassador Kethtar's four eyes gleamed with satisfaction as his elongated fingers tightened around the ceremonial staff. The ancient tradition would be honored today, just as it had been for 1,000 cycles across countless worlds. The children couldn't have been more than 8 solar years old. Their pale skin was streaked with tears and dirt, their small hands bound with energy restraints that glowed blue against their wrists. The boy tried to comfort his sister, whispering words in their primitive language that none of the assembled Zephyrians bothered to translate. After all, what was the point? The offerings never survived long enough for conversation to matter. "Behold," Kethtar announced to the gathered crowd of nobility and military officials, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones that marked his species' most formal occasions. "Today we honor the great devourer with the finest specimens this world has provided. These humans represent the pinnacle of their species' genetic potential." The pit stretched 40 meters across and twice as deep, its walls lined with the same living crystal that powered their ships. At the bottom, something massive stirred in the shadows. The beast had been dormant for weeks, waiting for this moment. Its hunger was legendary, its cruelty unmatched across the known galaxy. Even the Zephyrians, with all their technological superiority, treated it with careful reverence. Captain Velnon stepped forward, his military decorations catching the ambient light. "Are we certain these specimens will provide adequate entertainment? They seem rather small even for their species." Kethtar's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Size matters little to the beast. It feeds on fear as much as flesh. Watch how they tremble." He gestured toward the children with obvious pleasure. "Their terror will make the feast all the sweeter." The sister had stopped crying, though her small body still shook. She looked up at her brother with eyes far too old for her face. They had witnessed the destruction of their colony, watched their parents die in the initial bombardment. Now they faced something worse than death in this alien chamber, filled with creatures that viewed them as nothing more than entertainment. The viewing platform extended over the pit, allowing the assembled Zephyrians an unobstructed view of what was to come. Some leaned forward eagerly, while others maintained the cold detachment befitting their station. All understood the significance of this moment. The ritual feeding wasn't just entertainment. It was a demonstration of power, a reminder of the natural order that placed the Zephyrians at the apex of galactic civilization. "Release them," Kethtar commanded. The energy restraints dissolved, and the children were pushed forward to the edge of the platform. Below, the beast began to move with increased purpose. Something that might have been breathing echoed from the depths, though no one had ever been certain whether the creature actually required oxygen. Its origins were lost to time, captured eons ago by the first Zephyrian explorers who recognized its potential as both weapon and symbol. The boy stepped protectively in front of his sister, his young face set with a determination that sparked murmurs among the observers. Several Zephyrians clicked their appreciation. Defiance always made the spectacle more interesting. "Look at them," whispered Sub-Commander Thekra to her companion. "They actually believe they can fight it." "Primitive species often display such delusions," came the reply. "It's what makes them so entertaining in their final moments." The platform began to descend, carrying the children toward their fate. Ancient mechanisms hummed with power as the ritual followed its predetermined course. Each meter brought them closer to the beast, and each meter seemed to awaken more of its hunger. The shadows at the bottom of the pit began to shift with purpose. Suddenly, a new sound cut through the ceremonial atmosphere. The ship's alert system began broadcasting in urgent harmonics, and the assembled crowd turned toward the nearest communication panel in confusion. "Report," Kethtar demanded, his irritation clear. "Ambassador," came the voice of the ship's tactical officer, "we're detecting an unauthorized presence in the ritual chamber. Security sensors indicate a single life form has entered through the maintenance access." The platform stopped its descent, leaving the children suspended halfway to the bottom. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as they searched for any sign of intrusion. The chamber's entrances were all clearly visible and heavily guarded. Nothing should have been able to penetrate their security. Then they saw him. A figure emerged from the shadows near the pit's edge, moving with fluid grace despite obvious fatigue. He was human, that much was clear, though larger than the specimens they typically encountered. His clothing was torn and stained with what looked like lubricant from the ship's internal systems. In his hands he carried improvised weapons, sharpened metal fragments that gleamed with deadly intent. "Impossible," breathed Captain Velnon. "The ship's interior is completely sealed. How did he breach our defenses?" The human looked up at the suspended platform, his eyes meeting those of the terrified children. Something passed between them. A moment of understanding that transcended species barriers. Then he turned his attention to the assembled Zephyrians, and his expression hardened into something that made several of them step backward involuntarily. "Let them go," he said in accented but clear Zephyrian standard. His voice carried none of the harmonic sophistication of their language, but its meaning was unmistakable. Kethtar's mandibles spread in what passed for a smile among his people. "How remarkable. Another volunteer. Your timing is impeccable, human. The beast grows hungry and 3 offerings are better than 2. The human's response was swift and decisive. Without hesitation, he leapt into the pit. The assembled Zephyrians gasped in collective shock as the figure disappeared into the shadows below. Even the beast seemed surprised by this development, its movements becoming more agitated as it sensed this new presence in its domain. "Raise the platform," Kethtar ordered quickly. "We must observe this development." As the children were lifted back toward safety, the sounds of conflict began to echo from the pit's depths. The beast's roars mixed with something else, the battle cries of a species the Zephyrians thought they understood completely. But they were about to learn just how wrong they had been about humanity. The human hit the pit floor with surprising grace, rolling to absorb the impact before coming up in a combat stance. The assembled Zephyrians leaned forward, their 4 eyes wide with fascination and disbelief. In their 1,000-year history of conducting these rituals, no offering had ever voluntarily entered the beast's domain. Marcus Chen had been crawling through the ship's ventilation systems for 6 hours, following stolen maintenance protocols in pure determination. When he heard the children's screams echoing through the metal corridors, every instinct as a father and former Marine had ignited. His own daughter would have been about the same age as the girl on that platform, if she had survived the colony bombardment. The beast emerged from the deeper shadows, and Marcus got his first clear look at what the Zephyrians considered their ultimate predator. It stood 4 meters tall on 6 muscular legs, its body covered in chitinous armor that seemed to absorb light. Multiple heads weaved on serpentine necks, each mouth filled with rows of crystalline teeth that had evolved specifically for tearing apart living flesh. Bioluminescent patterns pulsed along its hide, creating a hypnotic display that had paralyzed countless victims over the centuries. "Magnificent," whispered Ambassador Kethtar from above. "The human will provide excellent sport before the end." But Marcus wasn't mesmerized by the creature's display. His military training had taught him to analyze threats objectively, and what he saw was a predator that had grown complacent from easy kills. The beast moved with the lazy confidence of something that had never faced real resistance. Its multiple heads turned toward him with obvious curiosity rather than immediate aggression. "That's right," Marcus muttered, circling slowly to keep his distance. "Take your time. Get a good look." The beast's central head tilted as if trying to understand this strange behavior. Its previous meals had always cowered or fled uselessly around the pit's perimeter. This one was different. This one was studying it back. Above, the Zephyrian crowd was growing restless. Subcommander Thekra checked her chronometer impatiently. "How long does the human intend to dance around?" The beast should have devoured him by now. "Patience," Kethtar replied, though his own mandibles clicked with slight irritation. Perhaps this species requires more time to understand its hopeless situation. Captain Velnon was less patient. "If the creature won't engage, we should activate the neural stimulators." The beast responds well to electrical encouragement. But before anyone could implement this suggestion, the situation changed dramatically. The beast's leftmost head suddenly lunged forward, jaws gaping wide enough to swallow Marcus whole. Instead of retreating, the human did something no Zephyrian had ever seen an offering do. He attacked. Marcus rolled under the snapping jaws and drove one of his improvised weapons deep into the soft tissue behind the creature's jaw. The sharpened metal fragment hardened through exposure to the ship's plasma conduits, penetrated the beast's hide with surprising ease. Dark ichor spurted from the wound as the creature reared back with a shriek of pain and surprise. The viewing platform erupted in shocked gasps. Several Zephyrians actually stepped backward from the edge, their usual confidence shaken. In a millennium of rituals, the beast had never been wounded. It was supposed to be invulnerable, unstoppable, perfect. Impossible, Captain Velnon breathed. The creature's hide is rated to withstand military-grade plasma weapons. Not all weapons, Marcus called up to them, his voice carrying clearly in the acoustically designed chamber. Your armor's designed to stop energy weapons and projectiles, not close-quarters combat with primitive tools. The beast was no longer treating this as entertainment. All 6 heads focused on Marcus with deadly intent, and the creature's movements became faster, more coordinated. It had awakened from its lazy confidence into genuine predatory focus. Marcus found himself dodging multiple attacks simultaneously as the beast used its size and reach advantage. Claws raked the air where he had been standing moments before, and one of the secondary heads nearly caught his leg in its jaws. But his smaller size and human agility kept him ahead of the creature's strikes. The human is actually fighting it, Sub-Commander Thekra said in amazement. How is this possible? Ambassador Keithtar's 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the conflict below. Their species must be more dangerous than our initial assessments indicated. Perhaps the military surveys were incomplete. One human fighting one beast proves nothing, Captain Velnon insisted, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. The creature will adapt. It always does. But Marcus wasn't just fighting randomly. Every movement was calculated, every dodge designed to position him for the next strike. He was mapping the beast's attack patterns, identifying the split-second delays between its head's coordination. When the rightmost head lunged forward, he was ready. This time he didn't just wound the creature, he blinded it. His second improvised weapon, angled perfectly upward, destroyed one of the head's primary eyes in a spray of luminescent fluid. The beast's shriek of pain and rage was so intense that several Zephyrians covered their auditory organs. It's learning the creature's weaknesses, Kethtar realized with growing alarm. The human is actually studying it. Then we stop this now, Captain Velnon declared, reaching for the neural stimulator controls. Before it damages our property further. No, Kethtar commanded, his hand intercepting the captain's. This is fascinating. When was the last time any of us witnessed genuine combat? The human cannot possibly win, but observing its tactics could provide valuable intelligence about their species. Below, Marcus had drawn the beast away from the center of the pit, using its own aggression against it. Each time it lunged, he led it further from optimal positioning. The creature's wounded heads were affecting its coordination, and its rage was making it sloppy. But Marcus was also tiring. The adrenaline that had carried him through the ship's ventilation system and into this confrontation was beginning to fade. His improvised weapons were dulled from use, and the beast still had 4 undamaged heads plus its original size advantage. Then he noticed something the Zephyrians had overlooked in their architectural design. The pit's walls weren't just decorative crystal, they were part of the ship's power distribution network. Faint energy readings pulsed through the crystalline structure in regular patterns. You made one mistake, Marcus called up to the watching aliens as he began moving toward the wall. You built your torture chamber inside your own power grid. The beast followed him, all heads focused on finishing what had become a genuinely challenging hunt. But Marcus wasn't retreating. He was positioning himself for one final gambit that would either end the fight or end his life. Above, Ambassador Kethtar suddenly understood what the human was planning. Stop him, if he damages the power conduits. But Marcus was already moving, his remaining weapon raised not toward the beast, but toward the crystal wall that contained enough energy to power a small city. The improvised weapon struck the crystal wall with perfect precision. Marcus had aimed for a junction point where multiple energy conduits converged, and the result exceeded even his desperate expectations. Raw power erupted from the damaged crystals in brilliant arcs of electricity that filled the pit with blinding light. The beast's scream was unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever heard from their prized predator. Its conductive hide, evolved to absorb and channel bioluminescent energy, became a liability as thousands of volts coursed through its body. All 6 heads writhed in agony as the creature collapsed, its nervous system overwhelmed by electrical feedback. Above, emergency lights bathed the viewing platform in red, as the ship's automated systems struggled to compensate for the sudden power drain. Ambassador Kethtar staggered as the platform's gravity generators fluctuated, his ceremonial robes billowing in the resulting energy discharge. Impossible, Captain Velnon gasped, his 4 eyes wide with shock. The human somehow knew our ship's vulnerabilities better than our own engineers. Marcus wasn't celebrating his victory. The electrical discharge had caught him as well, though his non-conductive clothing and smaller mass had protected him from the worst effects. Burns covered his arms where the energy had arced through metal fragments in his improvised weapons, and his vision swam from the electromagnetic pulse that had accompanied the overload. But he was alive, and the beast was not. Fascinating, Ambassador Kethtar said quietly, his scientist's mind overriding his shock. The creature is completely incapacitated, and the human calculated this outcome. Sub-Commander Thekra was studying her tactical display with growing alarm. Sir, the power drain has affected multiple ship systems. Engineering reports fluctuations in the gravity well generators and atmospheric recyclers. How? Captain Velnon demanded, turning on Marcus. How did a primitive understand our technology better than we do? Marcus looked up at them through the dissipating energy discharge, his voice hoarse but steady. Because you've forgotten what it means to fight for survival. You've had this beast doing your killing for so long that you've forgotten how to actually use your own ship as a weapon. The truth of his words hung in the air like the acrid smell of burned crystal. The Zephyrians had become so dependent on their technological superiority and ceremonial predator that they had grown soft, complacent. They conquered through overwhelming force, not through understanding their enemies or even their own capabilities. The power conduits weren't just decoration, Marcus continued, pulling himself to his feet despite obvious pain. They were a structural weakness. Any engineer would have seen it, but you stopped thinking like engineers the moment you decided to use this chamber for entertainment instead of function. Kethtar's mandibles clicked with what might have been admiration. You analyzed our architecture, identified our vulnerabilities, and exploited them in a matter of minutes. Remarkable. I'm a maintenance technician, Marcus replied flatly. Or I was before you destroyed my colony. Pattern recognition and system analysis were my job. Your ship isn't that different from the stations I used to maintain. The platform began to descend again, this time carrying a full squad of armed Zephyrian guards. Their energy weapons hummed with charging power as they prepared to take Marcus into custody. But something had changed in the dynamics of the situation. The guards moved with hesitation, their usual confidence shaken by what they had witnessed. Stand down, Marcus called to them, raising his empty hands. I'm not going anywhere, but we need to talk. You're hardly in a position to make demands, Captain Velnon said, though his voice lacked conviction. Aren't I? Marcus gestured toward the beast's motionless form. I just killed your ultimate predator with scrap metal and basic engineering knowledge. Your guards are afraid to get too close to me, and your ship's power grid is still fluctuating from damage I caused in under 30 seconds. The guards did indeed seem reluctant to approach, their energy weapons trained on Marcus but their movements cautious. They had watched him do the impossible, and none of them wanted to discover what other surprises this human might have prepared. What do you want? Ambassador Kethtar asked, his tone shifting from imperial authority to something approaching negotiation. Those children get returned to the nearest human settlement. Unharmed, Marcus said without hesitation. And you release any other human prisoners you're holding? Absurd, Captain Velnon interjected. You're a single primitive who got lucky against an overconfident beast. You have no leverage to make such demands. But Ambassador Kethtar was studying Marcus with newfound interest. Actually, Captain, I believe he does. Consider what we've learned today. This human infiltrated our ship through maintenance conduits we didn't even know were accessible. He analyzed our technology and turned it against us. He defeated a creature we considered invincible. A fluke, Velnon insisted. Was it? Kethtar asked. How many other humans are there like this one? How many other maintenance technicians who understand systems and pattern recognition? We've been treating them like primitive offerings, but what if we've been wrong about their capabilities? The implications hung heavy in the air. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds, based on the assumption of their own technological and biological superiority. If they had been wrong about humanity, what else might they have overlooked? You're suggesting we negotiate with a single prisoner? Captain Velnon asked incredulously. I'm suggesting we think strategically, Kethtar replied. This human has demonstrated abilities we didn't know his species possessed. Intelligence gathering would be more valuable than a simple execution. Marcus sensed the shift in their discussion and pressed his advantage. You want to know what humans are capable of? Start by keeping your word about those children. Show me that Zephyrians can be something other than the monsters I've seen so far. And if we refuse? Sub-Commander Thekra asked. Marcus smiled grimly. Then you'll find out what else I learned about your ship systems during my 6-hour tour through your maintenance tunnels. That power grid damage was just the beginning. The threat wasn't empty bravado. During his infiltration, Marcus had indeed identified multiple vulnerabilities in the ship's infrastructure. The Zephyrians had built their vessel for overwhelming offensive capability, not for resisting sabotage from within. A determined individual with engineering knowledge could cause catastrophic damage if properly motivated. Ambassador Kethtar seemed to realize this as well. Bring the children up from the platform, unharmed. Sir? Captain Velnon looked shocked. You heard me, Captain. This human has taught us that we may need to reconsider our assumptions about his species. The children will be returned as requested. As the guards moved to comply, Marcus felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. The gamble had worked, but he knew this was only the beginning. He had bought the children their freedom, but he was still a prisoner on an enemy ship surrounded by aliens who viewed humanity as inferior. The real challenge would be surviving long enough to find a way home. The children clung to Marcus as the platform lifted them from the pit, their small hands gripping his torn clothing with desperate strength. The boy whispered something in his ear, coordinates to the nearest human refugee camp, information he had memorized before their capture. Marcus nodded grimly, filing the location away for future use. You did good, kid. Marcus told him quietly. Take care of your sister. This isn't over yet. Ambassador Kethtar watched this interaction with visible fascination. Remarkable. Even under extreme duress, your species maintains social bonding protocols. Most primitives we encounter fragment under stress. We're not primitives, Marcus replied, gently separating himself from the children as Zephyrian medical personnel approached. And we're not alone. The medical team, distinguishable by their silver robes and additional optical sensors, began scanning the children with handheld devices. Their movements were efficient but not unkind, a clinical detachment that Marcus found preferable to outright cruelty. No permanent damage, reported the lead medic to Kethtar. The specimens show typical stress responses but remain physically viable. They're not specimens, Marcus said sharply. They're Sarah and David Chen. They have names, families, lives that matter. Chen? Captain Velnon's 4 eyes focused on Marcus with sudden intensity. Related to you? No, Marcus lied smoothly. Common name among humans. But that doesn't make them any less important. In truth, Sarah and David were his nephew and niece, the only surviving family members he had left after the Zephyrian bombardment of New Adelaide Colony. Their parents, Marcus's brother and sister-in-law, had died in the first wave of attacks. But revealing that connection would only give the aliens additional leverage against him. Sub-Commander Thekra was reviewing data on her portable display. Ambassador, our intelligence files on human social structures indicate strong tribal bonding. This specimen's protective behavior may extend beyond these specific individuals. Interesting hypothesis, Kethtar mused. Human, would you sacrifice yourself for any member of your species, or only those genetically related to you? Marcus considered his answer carefully. The question revealed how little the Zephyrians understood about human nature. Despite conquering multiple human colonies, that depends. Would you sacrifice yourself for any Zephyrian, or only those in your immediate clan structure? The deflection clearly frustrated Captain Velnon. You're hardly in a position to ask questions. Actually, I think I am, Marcus replied. You need to understand what you're really dealing with. Humans don't just fight for relatives. We fight for ideas, for principles, for complete strangers if the cause is right. That's what makes us dangerous. Dangerous? Velnon scoffed. Your colonies fell in ours. Your ships were destroyed without landing a single effective strike. Where exactly is this danger you speak of? Marcus smiled grimly. You conquered our territories. But did you break our people? How many resistance cells have sprung up behind your lines? How many maintenance accidents have happened to your occupation forces? How many of your outposts have gone dark for reasons your engineers can't explain? The silence that greeted this question was telling. Ambassador Kethatar's mandibles clicked thoughtfully as he processed the implications. "You're suggesting coordinated resistance activities," Kethatar said slowly. "I'm stating a fact," Marcus replied. "Humans don't surrender even when we should. Especially when we should. You've been treating occupation like conquest, but they're not the same thing." Sub-Commander Thekra was frantically accessing her communication systems, pulling up reports from various occupied worlds. Her expression grew increasingly troubled as she read. "Sir," she said quietly to Kethatar, "there have been unusual incidents across multiple sectors. Infrastructure failures, communication disruptions, supply convoy delays. Command attributed them to normal operational challenges." "But viewed as a pattern?" Kethatar asked. "They could indicate systematic sabotage," Thekra admitted reluctantly. Captain Velnon was growing visibly agitated. "You're suggesting that a species we've consistently defeated in open combat is somehow winning through covert operations?" "I'm suggesting you never understood what you were fighting," Marcus said. "You saw our military forces and assumed that was all we were. But humans are engineers, mechanics, farmers, teachers, doctors. Every one of us knows how to fix things, which means every one of us knows how to break them." The truth was beginning to sink in among the Zephyrian command staff. They had conquered human space by overwhelming military superiority, destroying fleets and capturing colonies. But they had underestimated the population they were trying to control. Every human civilian was a potential saboteur with intimate knowledge of the systems that kept civilization running. "The children," Kethatar said suddenly. "They will be released to human custody as agreed. But you, Marcus Chen, will remain here for further discussion." "That wasn't the deal," Marcus protested. "The deal was for the children's freedom," Kethatar clarified. "Your status was never resolved. However, I propose a different arrangement. Serve as a cultural liaison. Help us understand your species better, and you'll be treated as a diplomatic prisoner rather than an enemy combatant." Marcus studied the alien ambassador carefully. Behind the formal politeness, he could see genuine concern. The Zephyrians were beginning to realize they had bitten off more than they could chew with humanity. "What exactly are you proposing?" Marcus asked. "Mutual understanding," Kethatar replied. "You provide insights into human psychology and capabilities. We provide information about Zephyrian society and intentions. Perhaps we can find a path forward that doesn't require the complete subjugation of your species." "You mean you're losing the peace even though you won the war?" Marcus said bluntly. "We're experiencing unexpected challenges in our occupation efforts," Kethatar admitted. "Your perspective could be valuable in resolving these issues." Captain Velnon looked incredulous. "We're negotiating with a terrorist?" "We're consulting with someone who understands our opposition better than we do," Kethatar corrected. "Unless you have a better solution to the growing instability in the occupied territories." Marcus could see the political undercurrents flowing between the Zephyrian officers. Velnon represented the military faction that believed in pure force. Kethatar was more sophisticated, recognizing that sustainable conquest required more than just superior firepower. "I'll consider your proposal," Marcus said finally. "But I have conditions." "You're hardly in a position to make demands," Velnon snapped. "Actually, I am," Marcus replied calmly. "Because right now I'm the only human you have who's willing to talk instead of just plotting your destruction. That makes me either very valuable or very dangerous, depending on how you choose to treat me." The implications of this statement hung in the air as the medical team finished their examination of the children. Sarah looked back at Marcus with frightened eyes as they were led away, but he nodded reassuringly. They would be safe now. The Zephyrians needed to keep their word if they wanted any chance of meaningful negotiation. "What are your conditions?" Ambassador Kethatar asked. Marcus stood in the center of the now quiet ritual chamber, surrounded by armed guards and increasingly nervous Zephyrian officers. The beast's corpse lay motionless in the pit behind him, a stark reminder of what had just transpired. The acrid smell of burned crystal and electrical discharge still hung in the air, along with something that might have been the beginning of respect. "My conditions are simple," Marcus began, his voice carrying clearly in the acoustically designed space. "First, no more ritual sacrifices of any species. That practice ends today." Captain Velnon's mandibles spread in what passed for a sneer among his people. "You think you can dictate policy to the Zephyrian Empire based on killing one beast? I think I can demonstrate that your supposed superiority is built on assumptions that may be wrong." Marcus replied evenly. That beast was supposed to be invincible. Your security was supposed to be impenetrable. Your ship's systems were supposed to be beyond primitive understanding. How many other assumptions are you making about the species you've conquered? Ambassador Kethtar studied Marcus with growing interest. Continue with your conditions. Second, I want access to communication systems. If I'm going to serve as a cultural liaison, I need to be able to contact human resistance leaders and verify that any agreements we reach are actually being honored in the field. Absolutely not, Sub-Commander Thekra interjected. That would compromise operational security across multiple sectors. Which brings me to my third condition, Marcus continued as if she hadn't spoken. Full transparency about Zephyrian occupation policies and long-term intentions regarding humanity. If you want my help understanding humans, I need to understand what you're really trying to accomplish. The silence that followed was telling. The Zephyrian officers exchanged glances that spoke of classified information and political considerations beyond Marcus's current understanding. Your conditions are ambitious, Kethtar said carefully. They would require approval from higher authorities within the Empire. Then get that approval, Marcus said bluntly. Because right now you have two choices. You can treat me as a prisoner and learn nothing, or you can treat me as a consultant and maybe salvage your occupation before it collapses completely. Collapses? Captain Velnon demanded. Our forces control every major population center in human space. Our fleets patrol every shipping lane. How exactly is our occupation collapsing? Marcus smiled grimly. Because you're fighting the wrong war. You conquered our military and occupied our planets, but you never conquered our people. Every day your occupation continues, more humans learn how your technology works. Every repair they make, every system they maintain, every piece of equipment they service teaches them something new about your capabilities and limitations. Sub-Commander Thekra was accessing her data systems again, her four eyes scanning reports with increasing alarm. Sir, if we correlate the maintenance requests across occupied territories with the infrastructure failures, the patterns would be troubling, Kethtar finished. You're suggesting that our reliance on human technical support is creating vulnerabilities. I'm stating a fact, Marcus replied. You need us to keep your conquered territories running. But every human technician, every maintenance worker, every engineer forced to service your equipment is learning how to disrupt it. We're not just fixing your systems, we're studying them. The implications were staggering. The Zephyrian conquest strategy relied heavily on maintaining existing infrastructure with local personnel. They had assumed that human technical knowledge was too primitive to pose any real threat to their advanced systems. But if Marcus was right, they had inadvertently created an army of potential saboteurs with intimate knowledge of their own technology. This is speculation, Captain Velnon insisted, though his voice lacked conviction. Is it? Marcus asked. Tell me, Captain, how many of your technical staff are actually Zephyrian? How many are human contractors? And of those humans, how many do you really trust? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone present knew the answer. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered too many worlds too quickly to staff them entirely with their own people. They relied heavily on local populations to maintain the infrastructure of conquest. You're suggesting we've created our own enemy, Kethtar said slowly. I'm suggesting you never understood who your enemy really was, Marcus corrected. You saw our armies and navies and thought that was all we were. But humanity's real strength was never in our weapons. It was in our adaptability. We learn, we innovate, we find ways to turn any situation to our advantage, even conquest. The medical team returned at that moment, their equipment scanning Marcus with obvious thoroughness. Their leader, an elderly Zephyrian with additional optical implants, approached Kethtar with visible concern. Ambassador, this human's physiological readings are unusual. Explain, Kethtar commanded. His stress hormones are elevated but controlled. His neural activity suggests active strategic planning rather than fear responses. Most significantly, his muscle tension and cardiovascular patterns indicate readiness for immediate combat despite apparent cooperation. Marcus raised an eyebrow. You're surprised that I'm still ready to fight? After what I've seen you do to my people? But you're negotiating, Sub-Commander Thekra pointed out. Your behavior suggests rational cost-benefit analysis, not emotional response. Both can be true, Marcus explained. Humans are capable of compartmentalization. I can work with you to find solutions while simultaneously planning your destruction if you betray that trust. It's not contradictory, it's survival strategy. The medical officer's additional scans were revealing even more concerning data. Ambassador, his memory engrams show perfect recall of the ship's layouts he traversed during infiltration. He's essentially mapped our internal structure. Meaning what exactly? Captain Velnon demanded. Meaning he could replicate his infiltration route, the medic explained, or guide others through it, or sabotage critical systems he identified during his reconnaissance. Marcus said nothing, but his slight smile confirmed the medical officer's assessment. During his 6-hour journey through the ship's maintenance systems, he had indeed memorized everything he had seen. Structural weaknesses, power distribution networks, life support redundancies, even the locations of escape pods and armories. You're a walking intelligence asset, Kethtar realized. And you're deciding right now whether that makes me more valuable alive or dead, Marcus replied. Choose carefully, Ambassador. Because if I disappear, there are contingency plans in place that you really don't want activated. What contingency plans? Velnon demanded. Marcus's smile widened. The kind that humans excel at. The kind that turn your own infrastructure against you. The kind that demonstrate exactly why conquering us was the worst mistake your empire ever made. The threat was implicit but clear. Marcus had prepared for this possibility, and his death would trigger responses that the Zephyrians might not survive. Ambassador Kethtar looked around at his increasingly nervous staff, then back at Marcus. It seems we have much to discuss. Very well, human. We'll consider your conditions, but this conversation is far from over. No, Marcus agreed quietly. It's just beginning. 3 hours later, Marcus found himself in what the Zephyrians called a consultation chamber, essentially a comfortable prison cell with communication access and monitoring equipment. The walls were lined with the same living crystal that powered their ships, but Marcus noted the strategic placement of what appeared to be recording devices disguised as decorative elements. Ambassador Kethtar entered with a small entourage, his ceremonial robes replaced by more practical diplomatic attire. Behind him came Sub-Commander Thekra carrying multiple data tablets, and surprisingly, a Zephyrian Marcus hadn't seen before, younger, with different insignia marking her as some kind of technical specialist. This is Engineer Prime Zalthi, Kethtar announced. She's been reviewing the damage you caused to our power grid. Zalthi stepped forward, her 4 eyes studying Marcus with obvious fascination. The precision of your sabotage was remarkable. You identified the exact point where maximum disruption could be achieved with minimal effort. Such knowledge should have been impossible for your species. Should have been, Marcus agreed. But assumptions about what's possible have been your problem from the beginning. Zalthi activated a holographic display showing the ship's power distribution network. Red indicators marked the damaged sections, with branching lines showing the cascade effects throughout the vessel's systems. The repairs will take 48 hours and require rerouting power through backup conduits. But that's not what troubles me. What troubles you? Marcus asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. The fact that you caused this damage with improvised tools suggests an understanding of energy flow dynamics that rivals our own engineers. Yet our intelligence reports indicate that human technology is centuries behind our capabilities. Marcus studied the holographic display with obvious interest. May I? Zalthi glanced at Kethtar, who nodded permission. The engineer handed Marcus a control stylus, and he began manipulating the display to show different aspects of the power grid. Here's your real problem, Marcus said, highlighting several junction points throughout the ship. You've prioritized efficiency over redundancy. These networks would be devastatingly vulnerable to coordinated sabotage. Impossible, Zalthi protested. Those junctions are protected by multiple security protocols. Physical security, Marcus corrected. But if someone had legitimate maintenance access, he began tracing pathways through the ship's service corridors, showing how a determined saboteur could reach critical systems. Sub-Commander Thekra was taking notes rapidly. How do you know these pathways exist? Because I used them to get here, Marcus replied simply. Your maintenance protocols assume that anyone with access credentials is trustworthy. But what happens when you can't trust the people maintaining your systems? The question struck at the heart of the Zephyrians' growing dilemma. Their empire had expanded too rapidly to rely solely on their own personnel. They needed local expertise to maintain conquered territories. But that expertise came with inherent security risks they were only beginning to understand. "Show us," Kethtar commanded. Marcus continued manipulating the display, revealing vulnerability after vulnerability in the ship's design. Every strength became a weakness when viewed from the perspective of someone with maintenance access and hostile intent. "Your atmospheric recyclers are centralized here," he said, highlighting a major system. "Disable these 3 components and you have maybe 6 hours before life support fails. Your gravity generators are linked through this network. One cascading failure could leave you floating helplessly in space. Your communication arrays depend on these relay stations, which are completely exposed to anyone with a maintenance toolkit." Engineer Prime Zalthi looked increasingly disturbed as Marcus revealed each weakness. But these vulnerabilities would require intimate knowledge of our technology. Knowledge that humans shouldn't possess. "But we do possess it," Marcus said bluntly, "because you've been forcing us to learn it. Every human technician who services your equipment, every engineer who repairs your systems, every maintenance worker who keeps your colonies running, they're all learning how to destroy what they're being forced to build." The implications were staggering. The Zephyrian occupation relied on human expertise to function, but that same expertise was creating an increasingly dangerous security situation. "How many humans have this level of knowledge?" Sub-Commander Thekra asked. "More every day," Marcus replied. "And unlike your people, we share information freely. Every vulnerability one of us discovers gets passed along to the resistance networks. Every weakness gets documented and distributed." Kethatar was beginning to understand the scope of the problem. "You're creating a comprehensive guide to destroying our technology." "We're defending ourselves with the only weapons you left us," Marcus corrected. "Knowledge and determination." A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. Sub-Commander Thekra activated her personal display, and her expression immediately shifted to alarm. "Ambassador, urgent message from Sector Command. The mining station at Kepler 442 has gone completely dark. All communication lost, no response to inquiry signals." "Technical failure?" Kethtar asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected the answer. "Negative. The station's automated systems were sending normal status reports until exactly 14 minutes ago. Then complete silence. Search and rescue vessels are being dispatched, but estimated arrival time is 18 hours. Marcus felt a grim satisfaction. The timing was too perfect to be coincidental. Someone had been waiting for exactly this moment to strike. "That's not a technical failure," he said quietly. "That's a demonstration." "Of what?" Engineer Prime Zalthi demanded. "Of what happens when humans decide to stop cooperating," Marcus replied. "Your mining operations depend entirely on human engineers and technicians. If they decided to sabotage the station, the entire facility could be crippled in minutes," Zalthi finished, her voice barely above a whisper. Another chime sounded. This time it was Captain Velnon's voice coming through the communication system, his tone urgent and strained. "Ambassador, we're receiving reports of simultaneous system failures across multiple installations in Sectors 7 and 12. Pattern suggests coordinated sabotage activities." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his expression carefully neutral. "It seems the resistance networks have been busy while we've been talking." "You knew this was going to happen," Kethtar accused. "I hoped it would happen," Marcus corrected. "But I wasn't certain until now. You see, Ambassador, humans have something your species seems to lack: patience. We can wait for exactly the right moment to strike for maximum effect." "The right moment?" Sub-Commander Thekra asked. "When your leadership is distracted by negotiations," Marcus explained. "When your attention is focused on one human in one location, while hundreds of others are working quietly to dismantle your occupation from within." The scope of the coordination was becoming clear. While the Zephyrians had been focused on the dramatic confrontation in the ritual chamber, human resistance cells across multiple sectors had been implementing carefully planned sabotage operations. This was all calculated. Kethtar realized. Your capture, the fight with the beast, these negotiations, all of it was designed to provide cover for a coordinated strike. "Partly," Marcus admitted. "Though I have to say, jumping into that pit wasn't exactly part of the original plan. That was just necessary." Engineer Prime Zalthi was frantically accessing damage reports from across the Empire. The scale of this operation would require months of planning and coordination. "How did we not detect it?" "Because you weren't looking for it," Marcus said simply. You assumed that conquered people would stay conquered. You thought overwhelming force was enough to ensure compliance, but humans don't think that way. The communication system chimed again, and this time Captain Velnon's voice carried genuine panic. Ambassador, immediate emergency. We're receiving a general distress signal from the Tau Ceti Administrative Complex. They're reporting complete power grid failure and life support emergency. Marcus smiled grimly. And now you're beginning to understand what humans are really capable of when you threaten our children. The emergency alerts continued cascading through the Zephyrian command network as Ambassador Keith Tar stood in the consultation chamber, his 4 eyes fixed on Marcus with a mixture of respect and growing alarm. Sub-Commander Thekra was coordinating response efforts through her personal display, but the scope of the simultaneous sabotage operations was overwhelming their command structure. 17 installations reporting critical failures, she announced, her voice strained. Pattern analysis confirms coordinated human resistance activities across 8 sectors. How is this possible? Engineer Prime Zalthi demanded. Our security protocols should have detected this level of coordination. Marcus looked up from where he had been studying the ship's power grid display. Your security protocols were designed to prevent external threats and suppress open rebellion. They weren't designed to detect trusted personnel slowly gathering intelligence and waiting for the right moment to strike. The right moment being when we were distracted by you, Kethtar said grimly. The right moment being when human children were about to be fed to a monster for entertainment, Marcus corrected, his voice hardening. You crossed a line today, Ambassador. Even by the standards of occupation and conquest, what you planned to do to Sarah and David was unacceptable. Captain Velnon's voice crackled through the communication system again. Ambassador, urgent request from Sector Command. They're asking for authorization to implement martial law protocols across all occupied territories. Kethtar considered this for a moment, then looked at Marcus. Would martial law end this resistance activity? It would make it worse, Marcus replied immediately. Much worse. Right now, you're dealing with coordinated sabotage by technical personnel. Martial law would turn every human civilian into a potential insurgent. Is that really what you want? What do you suggest? Kethtar asked. And the fact that he was asking at all spoke volumes about how dramatically the situation had shifted. Marcus stood up, moving to the holographic display that still showed the ship's power grid. With a few gestures, he began highlighting different systems throughout the vessel. Right now, this ship has 47 human technical staff providing maintenance and support services, he began. They know about these vulnerabilities because I just demonstrated them. If you want this vessel to remain operational, you need their cooperation. Are you threatening us? Engineer Prime Zalthi asked. I'm stating a fact, Marcus replied. You can't run your empire without human expertise, but you can't trust that expertise as long as you treat us like expendable resources. That's the fundamental contradiction that's going to destroy your occupation. Sub-Commander Thekra looked up from her damage reports. The Tau Ceti Administrative Complex is requesting immediate evacuation assistance. Their life support systems are failing faster than our engineers can repair them. How many Zephyrian personnel? Kethtar asked. 347, Thekra replied, plus approximately 12,000 human civilians in the surrounding settlements. Marcus felt a cold knot form in his stomach. The humans in those settlements, they're not part of the resistance operations, are they? No, Thekra confirmed. They're civilian populations under our protection. Then you need to fix the life support immediately, Marcus said urgently. The resistance won't sacrifice innocent civilians to strike at you. If people start dying because of the sabotage, it will fracture the human unity you're dealing with. Kethtar studied Marcus carefully. You care about Zephyrian casualties as well as human ones. I care about unnecessary death, Marcus replied. Military targets, infrastructure, even your beast. Those are legitimate targets in a resistance operation. But civilians, whether human or Zephyrian, shouldn't pay the price for this conflict. Yet they will, unless this situation is resolved quickly, Kethtar pointed out. Then let's resolve it, Marcus said. Call off the martial law authorization. Issue a general amnesty for all resistance activities up to this point, and start treating humans as partners in running these territories instead of forced labor. Impossible. Captain Velnon's voice came through the communicator. Such concessions would be seen as weakness throughout the Empire, and continued resistance operations will be seen as incompetence, Marcus countered. Which is worse for your career prospects, Captain? Engineer Prime Zalthi was working frantically at her own display. I'm coordinating emergency repair efforts for the Tau Ceti complex, but our technical teams don't understand the sabotage methods well enough to counter them effectively. I could help with that, Marcus offered. In exchange for what? Cathatar asked. A communication link to the resistance leadership, Marcus replied. Let me talk to them directly. I can convince them to provide repair assistance for the civilian areas while we work out a broader agreement. You're asking us to trust you completely, Sub-Commander Thekra observed. I'm asking you to choose between trust and total war, Marcus said bluntly, because those are your only options at this point. You can work with humans as equals, or you can fight us until one of our species is extinct. There's no middle ground anymore. The silence that followed was filled only by the soft chiming of continued emergency alerts. Finally, Ambassador Kethtar made his decision. Open a secure communication channel, he ordered, but monitor everything. If this human betrays our trust, I won't, Marcus said quietly, because I want the same thing you do, an end to unnecessary suffering. But it has to be on terms that both species can live with. The communication link was established within minutes, connecting Marcus to resistance coordination networks across multiple sectors. The conversations that followed were conducted in rapid human languages that the Zephyrian translation system struggled to follow, but the tone was clearly urgent and serious. Tau Ceti repair assistance is being organized, Marcus reported after several minutes, but the resistance leadership wants guarantees about future human treatment before they'll stand down completely. What kind of guarantees? Kethtar asked. Full citizenship status for humans in occupied territories, Marcus replied. Representation in local government structures, an end to forced labor practices, and most importantly, no more ritual sacrifices of any species. Those are significant concessions, Kethtar said thoughtfully. They're the foundation of a sustainable peace, Marcus corrected, because the alternative is an empire that has to constantly fight insurgencies instead of focusing on growth and development. Over the next several hours, as repair teams worked to restore life support to threatened installations and negotiators hammered out the details of a new relationship between human and Zephyrian populations, Marcus found himself thinking about the children who had started this entire chain of events. Sarah and David were safe now, delivered to the refugee camp as promised. But their ordeal had catalyzed something much larger, a fundamental shift in the balance of power between conquered and conqueror. The Empire will need time to adjust to these new arrangements, Ambassador Kethtar said as the immediate crisis passed. Change comes slowly to our people. Change is coming whether you adjust to it or not, Marcus replied. The question is whether it comes through cooperation or catastrophe. As he looked out at the stars through the chamber's viewing port, Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. Humanity had demonstrated that they couldn't be simply conquered and controlled. Now both species would have to learn how to coexist as something approaching equals. It wouldn't be easy, but it was possible. And sometimes possibility was enough to build a future on. The beast was dead, the children were safe, and the galaxy would never quite be the same again.